Hi there, I'm Marina Orms, the founder of Astrology Heals at astrologyheals.com. And my business is called Astrology Heals because astrology is in fact very healing. It helps us understand ourselves at multiple levels: mind, body, emotion, and spirit. And it helps us understand what we need and what is the bigger picture of what's being asked of us. So it's not just telling us what's going to happen to us or how we're made up. It's actually helping us to understand a bigger picture of our own healing and evolution. So how we can respond, how we can change our perspective, our attitudes, how we can make changes in unconscious patterns that we may have. All of these things helping us to be more whole, feel more healthy, more peaceful, more aligned, more joyful, and more safe and happy. And so we have coming up this week, June 20th, we have a solar eclipse in the sign of Cancer. In fact, in the very first degree of the sign of Cancer. This is a very, very potent eclipse. It is, not only does it fall on the summer solstice, which is the day that the sun moves into Cancer, and also happens to be the longest day of the year if you're in the northern hemisphere. But it is also a shift into this beginning of Cancer. And Cancer, the sign of Cancer, is about feelings. It's a water sign, but it's also about family and roots and belonging. It's the sign of the mother and the child. And so it has to do with this deep sense of belonging. It connects us with our ancestry. It helps us identify with a bigger picture of a family and a family context. And so this question of who we are, where we belong, where we live, and making decisions around that is what the invitation of this solar eclipse on the summer solstice is. So, so the invitation to make decisions about who we are, about who is our people, who's our tribe, where do we belong, what's important to us. And dialing back a couple of weeks before this solar eclipse, we had a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, and some very, very potent energies and shifts around that lunar eclipse. You might recall that in this recent past, in the days leading up to that lunar eclipse, was the murder of George Floyd and the uprising in the collective of this discussion of systemic racism, the explosion of anger and protests, all of which are justified because, certainly the anger is justified due to the centuries of injustice. And going back to the concept of family and ancestry and belonging, these deep, deep wounds that are there for Black people in terms of where they belong, who they are, who, being taken from their ancestral home, etc. And so there is this experience of, for white people having white privilege, that we are all part of this story together. And so when you have privilege, when you have a power imbalance, you have two sides of that coin. You have an abuser or a perpetrator, and you have a victim. And we are in the position of having the power as white people and having that privilege, and certainly in the general sense, at least, people are going to argue about, well, what about this person and what about that person? But we're talking about generalities in the collective and the perception of race. And it's not certainly just Black people, all minority groups, there are issues, right? But in this particular instance, we're talking about the foundation of the United States of America and how it came to be. and how it became independent, where its wealth is built, etc. And so we have some deep problems, and that is what is coming to the surface through the process of this eclipse season that we're having right now in the context of bigger picture astrological cycles, which I've talked a lot about, so I won't go into right now. But what I do want to talk about and just touch on here is this question of identity. And we just do not have models in our collective, in the movies we watch, the stories that we tell and hear. It's very easy for all of us collectively to identify with the victim perspective of that power dynamic, that power imbalance. We have, pretty much any movie or story that you are present to, is about triumphing over evil. So it's about us as being the hero or the main character of whatever it is, being the hero to triumph over this evil that is dehumanized in a way. I mean, of course, victims are dehumanized. So I don't want to, I just want to be clear that what I'm saying is that the evil we are trying to triumph over is just, it doesn't have a depth usually. You don't usually see the perpetrator coming into consciousness or gaining in awareness or healing themselves or transforming to quote unquote get it and understand their victims and do that healing process that we all crave so deeply. So my point is that we just don't have examples. We don't have a story that tells us when you are in the position of an abuser, here's what to do. And so, of course, nobody identifies with that. Nobody wants to be the abuser. Maybe there are moments where you might be feeling mean for one reason or another, but in the general sense of how we identify, we just don't have models for how to come in touch with that part of ourselves that may be abusing our power, or that may have privilege, or that may be ignorant or in denial about the way that other people are experiencing life, and how we can how we have responsibility for that. So that's just something to think about. I know that there's just so much more there that we could dive into, but this idea that we all carry within us this dynamic, this need to other groups of people and to make them evil or to make them bad because we don't want to be that ourselves. And it's just absolutely critical, I think, in these conversations that we're having, that we begin to recognize the parts of ourselves that can unconsciously be in that silence that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about. We're being the silent friends who are not saying what we need to say because we don't see ourselves as the problem. And so anyway, that's just my perspective and my thoughts. This is an issue that I've thought about my entire life. I have read, I know the horrors of what's gone on and the traumas. And so if you aren't familiar with that stuff, it's really important to get yourself present to it and to take it in ways that are manageable for you. You don't want to overwhelm yourself to the point where you shut down, but it's horrific and it's real. And in terms of our history, and also in terms of what's going on with injustices today. So to think about this Cancer eclipse and to think of it in terms of how can we all be more caring for each other? How can we attend to our own needs in a way that helps us to be part of the solution rather than in denial or staying neutral, which perpetuates the cycle. So looking at ourselves and our capacity for being an abuser, I think is valuable. It is hard stuff to talk about, and again, we don't really have stories for it doesn't feel okay to quote unquote be the bad guy, and so if we had models of healing that were connected to being on the wrong side of a power dynamic, and then recognizing that, shifting your awareness, your perspective to a different level where that healing is possible, where you can recognize, come to a place of feeling that responsibility, whether that's apologizing, whether that's taking action, but not out of guilt, but really out of like, this is better for me too. It's helping to liberate ourselves from the dynamic. As human beings, we need to be freed from this feeling of having to be one side or the other in a win-lose type of situation, because we really are all one, and we really are dependent on each other for having our needs met, and for doing our own healing, and for living the truth that is in our hearts. And that's really why we're here, to live the purpose of our soul's purpose. So maybe this will help get you thinking a little bit. I'd love to hear from you in the comments what you think, what comes up for you, and we've got to keep it civil. So always respectful in the comments. And thank you so much for listening and for watching. My book is Cycles of Healing. It talks all about how we can use these astrological cycles to understand our bigger picture of healing, of shifting consciousness, of becoming more awake and aware, and healing mind, body, spirit, and soul. So check it out, Cycles of Healing. My name is Marina Orms. I'm the founder of Astrology Heals. Check me out at astrologyheals.com. Thanks again for watching, and take good care of yourself. See you next time.